I thought I was going to die that night on the side of the road. Instead, I met a man who changed my entire life. A small stray dog trembled in my arms, its coarse fur pricking my cheek as three men circled us like predators. Their laughter sliced through the cold evening air like sharp blades. Each step they took closed the distance between us. There was nowhere to run. "Drop it, sweetheart, dogs don't like liars," one of them said, grinning as he reached out. My legs felt like stone, but my arms tightened around the small body. I could hear its rapid, panicked heartbeat, and I swear mine matched its rhythm. I wasn't afraid of dogs. I was afraid of men like these, the ones who saw a lone girl on the roadside and thought it was their business. I opened my mouth to say something, but headlights cut through the darkness of the road. A black SUV pulled up behind us. A man stepped out. He didn't shout, didn't curse. He just looked at them, tall and calm, his voice low and even. "Leave." Something in his tone made even the loudest of the three flinch. One muttered something under his breath, but they backed off, dissolving into the shadows like smoke on the wind. The stranger turned to me. His eyes were calm, almost too calm, as if nothing he'd seen surprised him. "Are you hurt?" he asked. I shook my head, clutching the dog, though my hands were shaking. He looked at the dog, then at me. "Is it yours?" "No, I found him." "And what did they want?" I couldn't finish the sentence. He nodded once, then extended a hand, not to touch me but to gesture toward the dog. "He's scared, so are you. Let's get you both out of here." Something in the way he said it, matter of fact but oddly gentle, made my resistance crumble. I followed him to the SUV, still holding the dog because I wasn't ready to let go. Inside, it smelled of leather and faint coffee. Warmth poured from the vents, chasing away the cold that had clung to me for days, maybe weeks. He adjusted the mirrors, started the engine, and for a while we drove in silence. Only when my hand stopped trembling did he ask, "What's your name?" "Julia, Julia." "I'm Nicholas Cole." He didn't look at me, eyes fixed on the road. "Where were you headed?" The answer caught in my throat. I didn't have a destination, not anymore. "Just away." He didn't press, didn't even glance at me to judge my vagueness. Instead, he nodded toward the dog curled up in my lap. "Keeping him." I almost laughed, a rough, uneven sound. I don't even have a place for myself, let alone him. "Then maybe you both have one tonight," he said simply, turning off the main road. The highway lights faded as trees surrounded us, tall and whispering. I glanced at him, unsure why I trusted a man I'd just met. But the fear I'd felt minutes ago was gone, replaced by something stranger, a fragile sense of safety. We pulled up to a gated property. Beyond the gate stood a house like a piece of glass dropped in the wilderness. Modern angles, wide windows, quiet strength. He opened the gate with a remote and drove through. "You can stay in the guest house, it's separate from mine. No one will bother you," he said, his tone more factual than kind, as if kindness was too obvious to state. I followed him inside, clutching the dog, stepping into warm light and polished wood. For a moment I couldn't speak. I'd been prepared to spend the night on a bus station bench, and now I stood in a stranger's guest house. Safe. "Lock the door after I leave. We'll talk tomorrow about what you need. Food in the fridge, towels in the bathroom." He set a set of keys on the counter, then paused. "You look like someone who hasn't slept properly in a while." I swallowed hard, not because he was wrong, but because he seemed to see right through me. "Thank you, I mean it." He nodded and left, leaving me with the quiet hum of the heater and the soft breathing of the dog, now curled up on the floor. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my hands still shaking, but for the first time in weeks it wasn't from fear, it was from relief. I didn't know who Nicholas Cole was or why he stopped for me. All I knew was that tonight I wasn't alone, and that felt like a miracle I didn't deserve. When I finally closed my eyes in that guest house bed, I thought sleep would come quickly. It didn't. Memories have a way of creeping in when the world goes quiet. I wasn't running because I wanted adventure. I was running because I had nowhere to go. I grew up in a small apartment above a hardware store, just me and Mom for most of my childhood. Dad left when I was 5, no dramatic goodbyes, just a note on the counter and a bank account drained to the last cent. Mom cried for weeks, then hardened like stone. She worked double shifts at the hospital, always tired, always on edge. but she made sure I had what I needed. When I was 17, she met. At first, he was polite, too polite, brought flowers, washed dishes after dinner, laughed at all the right jokes. I wanted to love him, if only for Mom's sake. She deserved someone to love her back. But over time, his tone sharpened, like knives that cut unnoticed. Didn't like me. I don't know if it was because I reminded him of Mom's life before him, or because I didn't vanish into my room every time he came home. It started with small comments about how I left shoes by the door, how the fridge was always empty, how I never did enough around the house. "You're helping out, right?" Mom would say when I complained, but her eyes were already somewhere else. I did help, always did. At 16, I worked weekends at a diner, saving for college and covering our bills when Mom fell short. I studied accounting because she said it was safe, stable, something to keep me from repeating her mistakes. I listened even when it broke my own dreams. I loved art, pencils, charcoal, paint smudged on my hands, but I buried myself. When I turned 21, I thought things were finally falling into place. I graduated college, lined up interviews, paid off some of Mom's medical debt without even telling her. But was still there, picking at every thread of my life. The last fight started over something so stupid it feels unreal now. I was cooking dinner, pasta, nothing fancy. Apparently I used the wrong pan. He yelled, I yelled back, and then he said something I can't forget. "You're just like your father, useless and ready to run the second things get hard." I froze. Mom didn't. She slammed her hand on the table and told me to apologize to him as if his words were truth carved in stone. I grabbed a bag, threw in a few clothes, my sketchbook, and the little cash I had. Mom followed me to the door, eyes wide, mouth half open like she might say something, but she didn't, she just let me go. I took a bus to the station and bought the cheapest ticket north, thinking maybe Dad would take me in. Even after all those years, I'd heard he was in Washington, working some seasonal construction job, living with a new family. I didn't have his phone number, just an address scribbled on a Christmas card he'd sent when I was 13. When I finally got there, tired and freezing, a woman opened the door. She had 2 little boys clinging to her legs, hair messy from a long day. She looked at me like she knew who I was. Then she said, "He's not here, he's gone north for weeks at a time, and honestly he'd started a new life. I'm sorry." She was kind enough to let me crash on their couch for one night, but in the morning she asked me not to come back. It wasn't cruel, just final. So I kept moving city to city looking for anything. A job, a couch, a break. Instead, I got followed by strangers with nothing better to do on a cold night. And then there was Nicholas. Lying in his guest house, I felt something I hadn't in years. Safety, but safety is dangerous when you're used to fighting for every scrap of it. Part of me whispered not to trust it. People help because they want something in return, right? That's what always said. But something about Nicholas's voice was different. Calm, disinterested, like someone who didn't need anything from you, someone who just showed up. Maybe tomorrow I'd thank him properly. Maybe I'd leave before I overstayed my welcome. But tonight, wrapped in warmth I didn't earn, I let my eyes finally close, and for the first time in weeks I slept. I woke to sunlight streaming through tall windows, warm and golden like it was waiting for me. For a moment I didn't know where I was, then I saw the dog curled at the foot of the bed and remembered. Nicholas, the SUV, the guest house. The dog's tail wagged when I stirred. "Morning, buddy," I whispered, scratching his head. His whole body wiggled like he'd just won the lottery. Maybe he had, maybe we both had. I showered in water that didn't turn cold in 3 minutes, used a towel that didn't smell like laundromat bleach, and stood in the small kitchen, wondering what to do next. Leave, stay until he told me to go. I wasn't used to kindness without strings. There was a knock at the door, my pulse spiked, but when I opened it, it was just Nicholas in jeans and a gray t-shirt, hair still damp like he'd come straight from his own shower. In daylight, he looked less intimidating, though his eyes were the same. Calm, assessing, like he carried his own storms but didn't let them spill onto anyone else. "Sleep okay?" he asked. I nodded, "Yeah, better than ever." "Good, hungry." I hesitated. Accepting food felt like accepting a favor I'd have to repay somehow. He stepped back. "Come to the main house when you're ready. Bring him." He nodded at the dog, who was now wagging his tail like a maniac. Breakfast was scrambled eggs, bacon, and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. I ate slowly, aware of how surreal it felt. Me, a runaway girl with a stray dog, sitting in a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a magazine. When I finished, Nicholas slid a folder across the counter. "This is a job description. I need someone to keep the house in order. Laundry, cleaning, cooking, nothing fancy. Pay plus you can stay in the guest house as long as you want." I blinked. "You're offering me a job. You need one. You don't even know me." He shrugged. "I know you picked up a dog and stood your ground against 3 guys twice your size. That's enough for me." I stared at him, not sure whether to laugh or cry. "I'm not a housekeeper. I mean, I can cook and clean, but—" "Good enough," he cut in. "You'll figure it out if you want to." I should said no. I should thanked him and left before things got complicated. But when I looked out the window at the guest house, sunlight spilling across the grass like a welcome mat, I couldn't. "Okay," I whispered, "I'll do it." Something softened in his expression, just for a second, like a break in the clouds. "Good, you start today. Here's a credit card for groceries, supplies. I'll show you where everything is." By noon, I had my own set of keys, a closet full of cleaning supplies, and a fridge that was actually mine to stock. The work wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. For the first time since I left home, I wasn't drifting. That night, after scrubbing countertops and folding laundry I didn't wear, I sat on the guest house porch with the dog I'd named Lucky, watching the sun sink behind the trees. The silence here felt different, safe, not lonely. I still didn't know why Nicholas Cole stopped for me that night, why he trusted me enough to offer a job and a roof. Maybe he was one of those rare people who help without keeping score, or maybe he was lonely too. Either way, for the first time in months, I felt something I didn't dare hope for. Maybe I'd landed somewhere I could stay, even if just for a while. The first week settled into a quiet rhythm, morning coffee with Lucky wagging at my feet, laundry humming in the background, the faint scent of pine slipping through the windows. I hadn't realized how much I craved ordinary days, ones where no one yelled, where silence was peace, not punishment. Nicholas kept his distance, which surprised me. I expected some hidden catch, some reason he'd taken me in, but he didn't ask questions beyond the basics, didn't hover, didn't pry, he just let me work. The main house was sleek and modern, but somehow warm, filled with natural wood and sunlight. My favorite place to clean was the glass-walled living room overlooking the forest. Sometimes, when no one was watching, I'd stand there with a rag in hand and just breathe, just breathe. It felt like standing inside a painting. And maybe that's what stirred the old feeling, the itch I hadn't felt in years. One evening, I dug my old sketchbook out from the bottom of my bag. The cover was worn, pages curled from travel, but it still faintly smelled of graphite and old dreams. I sharpened my one remaining pencil and started drawing. First Lucky, curled up on the porch, then the line of evergreens outside, then the guest house itself. My hands remembered what my mind forgot. The lines flowed easily, shapes coming to life. I lost hours to it, so much that when I finally looked up, night had fallen over the property and I'd completely missed dinner. The next morning, I found Nicholas standing at the porch railing, holding one of my sketches. I froze, heat rushing to my face. "That's mine," I said. He turned the paper, letting the early light catch every pencil mark. "You drew this?" "Yeah, sorry, Don't apologize." He studied it a moment longer than me. "You're talented, really talented." I shrugged, uncomfortable. "It's just a hobby. I was supposed to be an accountant. Safe job, good pay, stability." The corner of his mouth twitched. "You sound like someone repeating what they were told to want." I didn't answer because he was right. That night he came back from town with something under his arm, a set of drawing pencils and a pad of fresh paper, crisp and new. He just set them on the counter. "I can't take this." "You work, you earn, call it a salary advance." My throat tightened, the kind of tight that comes when gratitude is so sharp it hurts. "Thank you." He nodded once and went upstairs, leaving me staring at blank white pages like they were some kind of portal. Maybe they were. Over the next weeks I filled them. Lucky sleeping by the fireplace, the morning mist clinging to the tree line, even once just his silhouette at the kitchen window as he poured coffee. He never said much about the drawings, but every now and then, I caught him looking at one with an expression I couldn't quite name. And me, I was changing. I wasn't just cleaning a house. I was building something inside myself, something I thought was gone for good. The fear I carried from Mom's apartment, from words, from every slammed door on the road, it was fading. Slowly, quietly. One evening, as I sketched Lucky with his head in my lap, I realized I hadn't thought about leaving in days. I wasn't rehearsing excuses or mapping bus routes or counting how many dollars I had left. For the first time in months, maybe years, I wasn't surviving, I was living. It had been almost a month since that night on the roadside. I'd settled into a rhythm. Early mornings with coffee and Lucky, days cleaning, evenings sketching by the big glass window as the forest whispered outside. For the first time in forever, life felt safe. Then she showed up. I was in the kitchen, kneading dough for dinner bread, when I heard tires on the gravel. A sleek silver car I'd never seen before pulled up by the main house. A woman stepped out, tall, elegant, the kind of beautiful you see in magazines. Glossy hair, perfect heels clicking on the stone path. Nicholas was on the porch when she approached. I couldn't hear what she said at first, but I saw him stiffen slightly, like he was bracing for a storm. He led her inside. Something in my chest tightened, a pang I didn't have a name for. I told myself it didn't matter. Why should it? I was just the help, the girl who scrubbed floors and folded laundry. Whatever Nicholas's life was outside this property, it wasn't my business. But I couldn't stop my feet from moving closer, pausing just behind the dining room door where their voices carried. "Don't act like you don't know why I'm here," she said, her tone smooth, almost sharp. "You're wasting your time with her." "Julia's not your business, Isabella." Nicholas's voice was even but colder than I'd ever heard it. "She's living on your property, playing house while you," she trailed off, probably catching the shift in his eyes. "I'm just saying you have a reputation, people will talk." The silence stretched long enough to prickle my skin. "Let them talk," Nicholas said finally. "You don't get to tell me who I help." Isabella scoffed. "Help, is that what you're calling it?" That was enough. I stepped back, my heart pounding, and hurried to the guest house before they could see me. My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped the dough bowl. Help, that's what this was to him. I knew I should be grateful. I had a roof, a job, safety. I owed him more than I could ever repay. But hearing her words was like being back in that apartment, with telling me I'd never be good enough. Mom looking away because it was easier than picking a side. That night I barely touched dinner. Nicholas didn't say anything, though he noticed. I could tell by the way he lingered in the doorway longer than usual, eyes slightly narrowed like he wanted to ask but decided not to. Later I packed a small bag just in case. I'd learned not to stay anywhere too long, not to let roots grow where they weren't wanted. But before I could zip it up, there was a knock. Nicholas stood there, one hand on the doorframe, his expression unreadable. "Isabella's gone," he said simply. I nodded, avoiding his eyes. She made some good points, maybe I shouldn't stay. His tone left no room for argument. "She doesn't speak for me. You're not going anywhere unless you want to, understand?" I swallowed. "Why are you defending me? You barely know me." His gaze softened just a fraction. "Because I know enough. You work hard, you don't take handouts, and you've brought life to this place. Don't let one bitter voice chase you out." I didn't answer because I didn't trust my voice not to crack. Instead, I nodded and sat on the edge of the bed, feeling like my chest might cave in from relief and something else I wasn't ready to name. Lucky pressed against my legs like he was agreeing we weren't going anywhere. Not tonight. 2 days after Isabella's visit, something shifted. Nicholas didn't avoid me, but there was a weight in his eyes I hadn't seen before, like he carried a burden I couldn't name. He still left early for work, still came home late, but now he lingered longer. Asked how my day went, what I'd drawn, if Lucky had chewed up another pair of boots. One evening, as I was wiping down dishes, he walked into the kitchen, cleared his throat, and leaned against the doorframe. "Can we talk?" I set the plate down carefully because his tone wasn't casual. "Sure, what's up?" "Nothing bad, it's about my parents." He paused, eyes flicking to the floor before meeting mine again. "They're coming to visit this weekend, it's complicated." I tilted my head. "Complicated how?" He hesitated. Dad's got health issues, heart stuff, and Mom worries about me, him, everything. I haven't exactly given them reason to stop worrying. I frowned. What do you mean? They think I'm alone too much. They want me settled with a family. The corner of his mouth twitched like he was laughing at himself. This visit, they'll push that again, and I don't want Dad stressing out. I wasn't seeing where this was going, so what do you need from me? He took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders like he was about to close $1 million deal. I want you to pretend to be just for the weekend. The kitchen towel slipped from my hands. You what? It doesn't have to be dramatic, just enough to make my parents think I'm happy, building a life. They'll go home relieved and Dad won't worry himself sick. I stared at him, waiting for the laugh, the just kidding. It didn't come. You want me, your housekeeper, to suddenly be your... His jaw tightened slightly. You're more than a housekeeper, Julia, and yes, I'm asking because I trust you and you make this place feel alive again. My cheeks burned. I looked away, fussing with the towel. Nicholas, this is crazy. What if they figure it out? What if I mess it up? You won't mess it up. You're honest and you care about people. That's all they need to see. The silence stretched. My mind raced. Images of me awkwardly smiling beside Nicholas while his mother scrutinized me, his father wondering who I was. Every instinct said to say no. I'd spent most of my life trying not to stand out, and this would put me right in the spotlight. But then I saw something in Nicholas's expression, a hint of vulnerability, like he hated asking but needed it. And maybe, just maybe, I wanted to help him the way he'd helped me. I exhaled slowly. Okay, I'll do it, but if this backfires, I'm blaming you. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Deal. That night he told me about his childhood, how his dad taught him to fish on the Columbia River, how his mom knitted scarves every winter, how their tiny house in a coastal town still smelled of cedar, and he didn't go home as often since his company grew, and guilt threaded every word as he talked about it. Listening to him, I realized this wasn't just about making his parents happy. It was about him trying to make up for lost time, to give them peace when he couldn't be there as much as they deserved. And I couldn't help but think, this man who saved me on a dark road, who gave me a job and safety, was now trusting me to save him back, even if it was just pretend. When he handed me a small jewelry box the next day, a simple silver ring to make it convincing, my fingers shook as I slipped it onto my left hand. It was supposed to be fake, but as I looked at my reflection, a strange thought whispered, what if it doesn't feel so fake? The day Nicholas's parents arrived, the air around the house felt different, like it had been holding its breath all morning. I stood at the window, smoothing the front of a soft blue dress Nicholas had picked out for me, feeling like a stranger in my own skin. Lucky sat at my feet, tilting his head like he was saying, "You sure about this?" "No," I whispered back, but I smiled at him anyway. Nicholas walked in, clean-shaven, wearing a shirt I'd only seen hanging untouched in his closet. He stopped for a second, looking at me. Not a long look, not dramatic, but long enough to send heat to my cheeks. "You look perfect," he said quietly, then cleared his throat and adjusted his cuffs like he hadn't just said that. Before I could respond, tires crunched on the driveway. A silver sedan pulled up, and out stepped a woman with kind eyes and a scarf around her neck, followed by a man with silver hair and a careful, slow gait. "Ready?" Nicholas asked. I nodded, twisting the simple silver ring on my left hand, the one he'd given me to sell the story. My pulse drummed in my ears as we stepped outside. "Mom, Dad, this is Julia," Nicholas said, and his hand slipped into mine, warm and steady. His mother's eyes widened with surprise, then softened into joy so fast it made my chest ache. She hugged me without hesitation, her voice trembling slightly. "Welcome to the family, dear. I was starting to think I'd never meet the one who tamed him." I laughed nervously, but Nicholas squeezed my hand once, a silent, "You're doing fine." His father shook my hand firmly, studying me with sharp eyes that still held warmth. "He's lucky, you know," he said, nodding toward Nicholas. "Don't let him forget it." The weekend unfolded like a dance I hadn't rehearsed but somehow knew the steps to. We cooked together, shared stories by the fire, even took a walk along the property's edge while his parents reminisced about raising Nicholas by the ocean. I played my part, smiling, leaning into Nicholas's arm when his mother asked how we met, laughing at the story of him falling out of a tree at 8. It was supposed to feel fake, but it didn't. The way he looked at me, steady and warm, made it unsettlingly real. The second night after his parents went to bed, I sat on the porch, staring at the stars. Nicholas joined me, handing me a mug of tea. "You were amazing today," he said softly. "They haven't smiled like this in a long time." "They're not hard to love," I said, cradling the warm mug. "They're good people." He nodded, silent for a while. "You remind me of what home used to feel like." The words settled in my chest, heavy and light at once. I looked at him, really looked, and for a moment I forgot we were pretending. His hand rested near mine on the porch railing, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his skin. I pulled back before it went too far. This was temporary, it had to be. The next morning his mom gave me a gift, a soft knitted scarf in shades of cream and gray. "I made this last winter, not knowing who it was for," she said, smiling. "Now I know." Something in me cracked. No one except Mom, well, before things went wrong, had ever made something for me with their own hands. I hugged her, hiding the sting in my eyes. When they finally left Sunday afternoon, waving as their car disappeared down the road, I exhaled, not realizing I'd been holding my breath. "You okay?" Nicholas asked. I nodded, clutching the scarf. "Yeah, they're wonderful." "They love you," he said simply, watching me with that unreadable expression again. And for a brief moment, I wished it wasn't pretend. I wished every word I'd said, every look we'd shared was real. But wishes are dangerous things. After his parents left, the house felt too quiet, like their warmth had lingered in the walls, then slipped out the door with them. I walked into the guest house, still holding the scarf his mother made, soft and warm against my fingers, and sat on the bed. It was pretend, every smile, every touch, every whispered in front of them, all a performance. But my chest ached like I'd just lost something real. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the way Nicholas looked at me when his mom hugged me, the way his fingers brushed mine when we reached for the same coffee mug. He was kind, steady, safe, and I was falling for him for real. But people like me don't get to fall for people like him. I was a runaway, a girl with no family to introduce, no grand plan for the future. He was successful, settled, the kind of man who had options. And I was just an option that happened to be convenient. The next morning, I made a decision. When Nicholas came down for coffee, I was already at the counter, my bag packed, Lucky's leash in hand. His brows furrowed instantly, going somewhere. I forced a smile. "Yeah, I think it's time. You've done so much for me, Nicholas, more than anyone has in a long time, but I can't keep staying here." He stared, stunned into silence for a second. "You don't belong, Julia, where's this coming from?" I swallowed hard, gripping the leash. "You don't need me, you just wanted a fake for the weekend, and I let myself believe it was more. That's on me, not you." His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed even. "Is that really what you think, that you were some kind of prop?" "What else could it be?" I whispered. He stepped closer, his eyes searching mine. "Do you have any idea what you've done since you walked into my life? This house was silent before you. I came home every night to empty rooms, the only sound the hum of the fridge. Then you showed up with a stray dog and a sketchbook, and suddenly it felt like a home again." I blinked, stunned. "Nicholas, no. You need to hear this." His voice softened, deep and rough at once. "When I asked you to pretend, it wasn't because I needed a lie. It was because I wanted my parents to see what I was starting to feel, even if I couldn't say it yet. You weren't a stand-in, you were you." Something inside me broke. I hadn't realized how much I needed someone to choose me. Not for what I could do, not for what I could give, but just for being me. I felt the sting in my eyes before the tears fell. "Why do you care about someone like me?" He lifted a hand, gently wiping a tear from my cheek with his thumb. "Because you're stronger than you know, Julia. You walked away from a life that broke you, and you're still standing. You make art out of pain. You care about every living thing you touch, even strays like me." That made me laugh through the tears, and he smiled, soft and crooked, like he hadn't done it in years. "Please don't go," he said quietly. "Not because I need help with this house, not because of some fake story. Stay because I don't want us to end." The word us landed like sunlight after rain, warm and startling. I dropped the leash and stepped closer, the scarf still clutched in my hand. "Okay," I whispered, barely audible, "I'll stay." Lucky barked once like he was sealing the deal. And Nicholas laughed, a real laugh, deep and unguarded. Then he pulled me into his arms, slow and sure, like he was afraid to break the moment. For the first time in years, I wasn't running from something, I was running toward someone. 3 months later, the guest house wasn't a guest house anymore, it was home. My clothes hung neatly in the closet. Lucky had his own bed by the window, and my collection of sketchbooks had doubled, then tripled, until I had to buy a shelf to hold them all. Nicholas's parents visited more often. Each time, his mom hugged me like I'd always been hers, pressing another hand-knitted scarf or a jar of peach preserves into my hands. His dad teased Nicholas about finally growing up, but every word dripped with pride. They didn't look at me like a pretender anymore because I was, and neither was Nicholas. We were still learning each other, still figuring out what it meant to be two people from different worlds choosing one path. But there was no pretending in the way he reached for my hand in the grocery store, or how his eyes softened every time I laughed, or how he sat quietly on the porch while I sketched, like he didn't want to disturb something sacred. One crisp Saturday morning, he told me to dress nice. "Just something comfortable," he said, grinning like he was hiding a secret. I followed him to a small building in town, where the smell of oil paints and paper hung thick in the air. It was an art gallery, my art gallery. He'd been talking to the owner for weeks, showing her my sketches without telling me. Now they hung on the walls, Lucky curled up on the porch, the forest mist around the guest house, Nicholas leaning against the railing with that thoughtful look he always tried to hide. My throat tightened as people milled about, studying them, pointing out their favorites. "Nicholas, I can't believe you did this." "You deserve it," he said simply, standing behind me, his hand warm on my shoulder. "You brought this place to life, let people see what you see." That day, a woman bought one of my drawings, a simple pencil sketch of the guest house. I stood in shock as she handed over the check, whispering, "There's so much peace in it, it feels like home." Home, that word used to feel dangerous, like something that could vanish without warning, but now it felt steady, like roots finally finding soil. Later, after everyone left, I stood in front of the last piece, the one Nicholas had quietly convinced me to finish for the opening. It was all of us together, Nicholas, his parents, Lucky at our feet, and me, smiling in a way I didn't know I could. I traced the edge of the frame with my fingertips, my heart full. "I think I'm finally done running," I said softly. Nicholas stood beside me, his arms slipping around my waist. "Good," he murmured, kissing the top of my head, "because I wasn't planning on letting you go." I leaned into him, the scent of cedar and coffee wrapping around me like the scarf his mother made, and smiled. For the first time in a long time, I didn't wonder where I belonged. I already knew. I belonged here, with Nicholas, with Lucky, with the life I'd built from the ashes of everything I'd lost. And it was only the beginning. The sun sank behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold as I put the final stroke on a painting. Not a pencil sketch this time, but a full oil painting, my first commission from the gallery in town. Lucky dozed at my feet in my new studio, a small building Nicholas had built for me last spring. "Every artist needs a real place to create," he'd said when I tried to protest the expense. Now the walls were covered with my work, some sold, some just for my soul. The smell of paint and turpentine was as familiar as morning coffee. I stepped back, studying the canvas. It was the view from our bedroom window, yes, our bedroom, because I'd moved into the main house 6 months ago, at dawn, when the mist dances between the pines. "It's beautiful." I turned. Nicholas stood in the doorway, still in his work shirt, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up like he'd just gotten home and come straight to me. His eyes, as always, lingered on me a little longer than necessary before shifting to the painting. "You think so?" I asked, wiping paint from my fingers onto my apron. "I'm still not sure about the shadows on the trees, maybe too dark." He stepped closer, studying the canvas. "They're perfect, like everything you do." I rolled my eyes, but a smile broke through anyway. "You're biased." "Maybe," he said, wrapping an arm around my waist and pulling me close. His breath tickled my temple, and I felt the day's tension melt away in the warmth of his touch. But I'm right. We stood like that for a moment, looking at the painting until Lucky stretched and nudged my leg, demanding attention. I laughed and bent down to scratch his ears. You know, he thinks this is his studio, I teased. Nicholas chuckled. He thinks the whole house is his, and maybe he's not entirely wrong. I turned to him, raising an eyebrow. You're giving the house to the dog. Well, he'll have to share, he said, and there was that tone I'd come to recognize, a mix of playful teasing and something deeper, serious. He stepped back, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a small box, not the one with the simple silver ring I'd worn for his parents. This was different, velvet, deep blue, with a faint gleam in the studio's light. My heart stopped. Nicholas, I started, but he held up a hand, stopping me. Just listen, he said, his voice soft but firm. A year ago, I found you on the side of the road, and you've changed everything since then. This house, my life, me. You made me remember what it feels like to want more than just getting by. You gave me a home, Julia, not a building, but a feeling, and I want that forever. He opened the box, and inside was a ring, delicate, with a small sapphire that glowed like the morning sky. Simple but stunning, like everything he did. Julia, he said, dropping to one knee, his eyes locked on mine. Will you marry me? Not for my parents, not for some game, for me, for us. Tears were already streaming down my cheeks, but I didn't bother stopping them. I looked at him, the man who saw me when I was invisible, who gave me safety when I was lost, who loved me even when I didn't know how to love myself. Yes, I whispered, my voice shaking with emotion. Yes, I'll marry you. He slid the ring onto my finger, and I threw myself into his arms, laughing and crying at once. Lucky barked, bouncing around us like he knew what was happening and wanted in on it. Nicholas kissed me, slow and deep, and I felt the whole world fit into that moment. His arms, the warmth of his breath, Lucky's barking, the smell of paint around us. When we finally pulled apart, he pressed his forehead to mine, his voice rough with emotion. You're my miracle, Julia, don't forget that. I smiled, touching his cheek. You're mine, too. The wedding was small but perfect. We held it in the backyard, under the tall pines I'd painted so many times. His parents were there, his mom crying and hugging me so tight I could barely breathe. His dad, still cautious with his health, shook my hand and said, You've made him happy, that's all I ever asked for. Lucky, with a tiny bow tie on his collar, proudly carried the rings, though he did try to run off with them into the bushes while everyone laughed. My own parents didn't come. I sent Mom an invitation, but the response was silence. It hurt, but not as much as it once would have. I'd built a new family, not just with Nicholas, but with his parents, with Lucky, with the people at the gallery who bought my work and saw pieces of my soul in it. After the ceremony, we danced barefoot on the grass under the stars, music spilling from an old radio. I pressed myself to Nicholas, feeling his heartbeat under my cheek, and thought about that night on the roadside when I thought I'd lost everything. I was wrong. I hadn't lost everything, I'd found everything. Our life grew like a painting you start with one stroke, not knowing what it'll become. My work was selling across the state now, and I had a small studio in town where I taught classes for kids who, like me once, thought their dreams didn't matter. Nicholas still ran his company, but he came home earlier now, often with flowers or a new toy for Lucky, who, despite his age, still acted like a puppy. We had a daughter, with Nicholas's eyes and my stubbornness. She loved messing around in my studio, smearing paint on her little hands, and I already knew she'd inherit my love for art. One evening, with asleep upstairs and Lucky dozing by the fireplace, I sat at my easel, working on a new painting, a portrait of our family laughing on the porch. Nicholas wrapped his arms around me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. That's my favorite, he murmured. You say that about every painting, I teased. And I'm always right. I laughed, set the brush down, and turned to kiss him. In his arms, I felt home, not just this house, but the life we'd built together. I wasn't a runaway anymore. I was an artist, a wife, a mother, a woman who'd found her place in a world she never expected. And every day, with every brushstroke, every bark from Lucky, every look from Nicholas, I knew this happiness was mine, real and forever.